Welcome to Straight Talk for Entrepreneurs, where we reveal what it really takes to build a successful business. Whether you are starting with an idea or growing your business, this is the show for you. My guests and I will show you how to build a strong mindset, a powerful body, a profitable business. Hi, I'm Brandon C. White, and this is Build a Business Success Secrets. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Build a Business Success Secrets. We've got Kelly back. How are you, Kelly?
Hey everyone, I'm well. Thanks, Brandon.
Yes, and today, this is really a part two. We did a earlier podcast, and we've had a lot of people who were in the 9 Days to Turn Yourself into a Powerhouse series write us, and they like our podcast. So today, we thought that it would be good to talk about cascading because of all of the uncertainty that I think sort of feels like, Kelly, it piled up here, not only in the world. I mean, entrepreneurs deal with uncertainty. So this is a great topic for any entrepreneur out there or building a business or managing a business during this whole crazy times or any crazy times. But I think the outside world is also experiencing some uncertainty. And I think Kelly and I were talking before we started recording, that it is almost starting to really wear on people. What do you think, Kelly?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, look, anybody who's listening, if you go back and listen to the previous podcast that we recorded on stress, it's really fair to say that I think that the volume of stress for everybody is ratcheted up to like 10 plus on that decibel scale. It's just really, really high right now. And how it manifests for you, how it's going to manifest for the people in your concentric circles of life, social circles, business circles, family circles, friends, etc. It's going to look a little different to everybody. So if you're out there, if you find yourself nodding your head as I'm saying all of this, you are in good company. And Brandon, I want to go back to something that you had just said, just a few minutes ago about the entrepreneurial landscape. It's true. Entrepreneurs, they deal with this kind of uncertainty on a daily basis, as do many other people out there. I think people who work in the stock market, finance, people who work in an emergency room, people who work in just tight, fast paces. You never know what essentially you're going to get. Some people thrive off of that. Some people are building their resiliency reps in those environments.
Yeah.
Also, when we were speaking a couple months ago, you were talking about surfing. And how surfing, you just don't know what's in the water around you. I mean, no one wants to be a chicken McNugget to a great white shark if you have a seal around you.
That's for sure.
For sure. And we also have people like Laird Hamilton who thrive in some big waves. I was just seeing it in, I think it was Forbes magazine a couple of weeks ago, the big waves that come off the coast of Portugal. Fantastic woman just recorded the biggest wave she had ever surfed. I think it was 80 feet plus. It's pretty extraordinary. So, some people like that just thrive off of those conditions. So what we want to talk about in today's podcast is, let's talk about overwhelm. Let's talk about cascading and how we're defining that one. And then what are some easy steps you can do? Because here's why you want to get out ahead of it. If you don't get out ahead of overwhelm, it can really start to do some damage. It can start to erode your self-confidence. It can start to erode maybe how you see yourself, especially if the ways in which you had shown up in the world are radically disrupted. So for example, if somebody out there is used to going into the office, that's where they take a lot of their social energy, their professional identity, and suddenly now you're working from home in an environment where your family is like, hey buddy, I need you to get that dishwasher loaded. Like, I don't care what you're doing on that computer. Like, you've got a family here too. How you go into your next meeting may not be as confident as you had hoped if you had a situation in which, or an environment that you could really control. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how the world is volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and it's all these things and more. So when I'm talking about the word cascading, I'm really looking at it from a metaphorical perspective. I love the ocean. I love standing on the beach, and I love looking at the waves rolling in. And each wave, the more you look at them, they're different. Sometimes every once in a while, if you're a surfer or a body surfer, you know that there's going to be a wave that's going to take you to shore. It's going to be brilliant. and some of them are not going to get you anywhere. So cascading is the same thing that we do in the mind. It's just when we look out in our environments, our story machines inside of our heads, they start to say, oh, look at that wave. Um, I know what that feels like because that reminds me about the time when this thing happened. And oh, yeah, that reminds me about the time this thing happened. And all of a sudden, you're just in a tailspin. You're just cascading way down. I mean, how does that feel for you, Brandon, as you surf? I mean, does this like resonate with you as well?
Yeah, I was just thinking when we were talking before we started recording, as it relates to entrepreneurs, and I think what's happening in today's, even for people like Laird and all these, I mean, entrepreneurs, emergency people, all the people in the fires out here, you talk about uncertainty, like not knowing where a fire is going to go in an instant. But I think what's happens, or where you begin to be tested, that you need to be prepared, is that even if you are operating at that level, it's the compounding effect that you're
Right.
not, that catches you off guard. Like even me, I was like, oh, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been doing this for 2 decades plus. I'm like, whatever, it'll be good. And then months ago, I think I mentioned it to you. I actually looked at the scale because I was like, nothing's going to change. Well, something changed because my fitness certainly didn't go down, or my activity events, but my scale went up. And I actually had to go back and look at that. And it's this thing that creeps up on you. And really what I would say is it's because it's compounded.
Mm-hmm.
And when things compound, that's when it creeps up on you, it sneaks up on you. And I think going back to what you said, that's when the confidence chink in your armor, so to speak, shows up. And then once you start questioning yourself, I think it just turns into a whole nother situation. And people working at home now, like you're saying, they had the workplace under control, the office, wherever you are. Now that they have to work from home, and there's these other things, it's like, well, why am I breaking down? Not breaking down and having I don't know what do you call it? Like a mental breakdown, but effectively, like you start to have that, you get scared. And once you get scared,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of happens. So,
It's so true. I think another reflection of this is I was recently consulting with a team that just had to go back into an office space for the first time. And they're wearing masks, they're working in some tighter spaces, and the older population's like, yeah, we're just going to do this thing. The younger population is asking questions like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. And the more that they were venting, the more emotion that they were heightening, right? Their emotional response was just getting more intense and more intense and more intense, because it's reminding them about, and this thing happened, and then this thing happened. You could watch how in that 30-minute vent, which is important because you're feeling these feelings, you need to experience them, you need to express them, and then you want to heal from them, you want to start to move back into recovery. You don't want to stay on that loop, right? I was watching some of these individuals I was consulting just kind of say after they evented, I'm freaking exhausted. And I'm like, of course you are, because your stress response met this moment thinking that you were dealing with a saber-toothed tiger. You see all of this as a horrible threat. Your body is giving you adrenaline and cortisol. You think that this is a nutty experience, and it's true. There's all shades of this that don't feel good. So your body is like, please return to the highlighted route. Like, let's get the crap out of here. And in this professional moment, you're also trying to just do the job you have to do. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get into their heads and just say, like, okay, we got to calm this down, because at this point you are now burning more energy than you have. This is not going to be sustainable. This will not help you by the time you get to Friday evening. This is not going to help you when you are home with your family on the weekend. You're going to be exhausted and at risk of getting sick. And nobody right now wants to get sick. I mean, not to be dramatic about it, but I think anybody out there is like, I don't want anything. No whammies here, please. So The danger of cascading is it's very seductive. It's, oh yeah, we're social creatures. We have memories, we tell stories. So we are hooked to these waves when they come in. It's so much more work and self-awareness and presence of mind to say, wow, I need to calm myself down in this moment. I need to breathe and pause and reflect. And just because these waves are coming to me doesn't mean I have to let them dictate my day. And that is really hard when you turn on the news, when you get home, or on one of your breaks at home. And you're like, oh my God, I should not have done that. World is chaos. Turn off. World is chaos here too. So let's just start with the cascading piece, and let's talk about when you notice that this is happening to you, and then what do you do about it? And then
Go ahead.
we'll go a little deeper then into if you have been hanging out in that space for longer than perhaps has been smart or wise, and you're ready to get out of this whirlpool, how do you start to rebuild yourself so you don't fall back into it?
There's just one thing that I wanted to say before you get started on that is I would suggest to people that you don't need 100% success here.
No.
Right? Like and I think as you were talking, it was hitting me. I don't know why, that I think everybody in this, and I'm glad you didn't say the word meditation yet, but I think meditation's overused right now. And it's like, oh, well, you don't meditate? Well, no, I don't meditate. I ride my bike, but no, I don't meditate. But if you can just take the edge off, then your anxiety level will decrease. So that's all I wanted to say to listeners out there, is that you don't have to have 100% success, like you're going back to normal. I think it's unrealistic to think that at this moment in time and that you're going to go back to normal, whatever that normal was. So just if you're successful a little bit, you will have decreased your anxiety, and I don't know what else you say, Kelly, whatever that is.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I do agree with you. I think that meditation is being overused as a term. I mean, this happens in the consulting, coaching, yoga communities. Like self-love is overused, right? Meditation is now becoming overused. What I'm trying to get at is you want to catch yourself in the moment you are in the tailspin or you are in the whirlpool, and you want to even recognize that you're there, and then you want to get the crap out of it. And that might just be recognizing it, and that is enough. That is your big bicep curl that you have done. That little self-awareness blip is going to do more for you than perhaps 10 minutes of meditation, because your world may not be able to tolerate that right now. A really good example of this, since we're staying with this water imagery of surfing, and I talked about the ocean earlier. When I was a young girl, about 13, I went down with my family. We went to the Atlantic beaches, and I love body surfing. Big fan of it, like reading the waves and going out there and putting myself, like try to see if I can get all the way back into shore. So we're out there, a storm had just come through. So the surf is great, right? You're really awesome. But I didn't know at the time, and I don't think my family did either, that area was pretty ripe for riptides. And I found myself, my sister and I both, we found ourselves in one. Now, here's the thing. My sister gets saved by some good looking guy on a freaking boogie board. Like, she's towed to safety. And there's me with my really long hair. I'm fighting the waves because I didn't know what to do yet. The waves are pushing my hair over my face. It's clogged. So it's like I'm getting waterboarded underwater, and I'm exhausting myself with every time I try to put my feet in the sand and just get ripped back out. Fortunately, I made it. I'm sitting there back on the shore thinking I don't know how that just happened. But I remember my parents sitting me down afterwards saying, like, next time you do this, all you have to do, Kelly, is you need to do what feels crazy, which is to let it take you out past the surf line and then swim diagonally back to shore. And you're like, I don't want to do that because there's sharks out there. Like, I don't want to go past that point. Are you crazy? They're like, no, it's counterintuitive. You've got to learn to do that. So, getting really good at your side stroke, right? To like get yourself back on the diagonal. And it's been an important lesson. And that's the same thing that we're talking about here. It's the moment where you realize you can't breathe. It's the moment you realize you are panicking. It's the moment you realize your mind is spinning and you don't know where you are anymore. You're out of the present moment. And it's going to be very seductive to want to fight those waves. So don't, just surrender to it. Yeah, this is what I do when that happens to me. I will sometimes put a hand on my heart or a hand somewhere on my body, right? Because I want to start that oxytocin. I want to signal to my body, hey, parasympathetic nervous system, we are not fighting anything right now. We can start to calm the jets down. And I'll just talk about what's real. Yeah, this is a freaking tough moment. This is really hard. I don't have the answers to this. I don't know what to do. I think I'm at the end of my rope. I think I am going to like pull my hair out. I think I'm going to like want to scream. I think whatever, you know, when you say what's true for you, you don't always have to act on it, by the way. But when you say what's true for you, all you're doing in that moment is like I'm in the whirlpool. That's right. Yeah, I'm here. And by not fighting it, I'm going to get myself out of it because I see what's happening. I see what's going on.
And that's really the tool.
That's the tool. That's it. And you do not have to get it 100%. In fact, let's just level set. You won't, because it's a new habit that's going to take time to build. All we're asking you to do is figure out in your physical body, you at home listening to this, where does your body start to signal to you that you are in cascading? You're letting the waves of life take you over. You're drowning. What is it? Is it a pit in your stomach? Is it that your mind is racing? Is it that you just want to punch something? Is it that you're getting really aggressive out there on the roads? Is it that you are short with your friends and your family? Is it that you're trying to pick up a book and you just can't concentrate on it? What is it? You want to name it. I do think that the fairy tales tell us some truths. If you can name the monster at your gate, if you can name the thing, you will take control of it. And that's really what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking about when I'm on my bike, and I was riding this weekend, and when you're going really fast on a road bike, you don't have the ability to really make a fast turn. And there was something in the road, and your adrenaline, it can happen if you're doing anything at that high pace. It just comes up irregularly, right? And I've gotten much better at it over the years, but this weekend I was remembering, and I was like, oh yeah, my adrenaline's really pumping right now. And as soon as I did that, it brings your focus back. I don't know, I can't explain. It almost like offloads it, right? Like it doesn't have control over you. And I'm hesitant to say control because I don't want to say that it does. But if you have you have this adrenaline going, or you have this thing, it is controlling you. It effectively is controlling you. And you can't, when you're going that fast and you make a turn, you're basically going to kill you, or definitely going to hurt you at that speed. So if you can name it, get your head together, it really just helps you get your head together. I don't meditate or anything, but just by being like, oh man, I got a lot of adrenaline going through me right now. It like separates my body from my head. And I had that, candidly, I was driving very fast down to LA, and there was a raccoon in the middle, a dead raccoon in the road. And I remember, this was a few weeks ago, and I'm going really fast and I can't swerve. And I remember the adrenaline just pumping, and all these trucks are around, and you almost start to lose yourself in that adrenaline because it's taking over on this automatic thing. And I was like, Brandon, your adrenaline is going crazy because you felt like you just went through something where you could have died, which maybe you could have, but you're not dead and you're moving forward still really fast. So get your head together. And it just separates. I would offer the listeners to do what Kelly is saying, is just name it. Just name it and watch what happens, because it separates that.
Yeah, it breaks that loop. And the other thing that we need to talk about too, just briefly to mention, is that sometimes you are so down in the whirlpool, you can't name it by yourself. And it's a good time to get help. I mean, look, even if you've read any of the old classic, Dante's Inferno, even when Dante went down into hell, he had a guide to help him get through it. So it's worth saying as a caveat that if you are really in the whirlpool, if you don't know how to name it or how to get out, please get some help. Find a good friend, find a professional, find somebody. You don't have to go through this by yourself, nor should you. I mean,
I
being human is really hard, and it's harder in times when things feel out of control and extremely uncertain.
Yeah, I have a quote, Kelly, and it's not exactly, but what you just said is really important. Is sometimes you need someone to name it. I remember I was on a hike with a friend. This is many, many, many years ago, and they were just talking out loud, and I guess it just came out. I was like, "Man, you sound depressed." He's like, "Do you think so?" I was like, "Yeah, you sound depressed." He went and got help, and to this day, it completely changed his life from that moment. And it's really because I didn't do anything magical. I just was listening on a hike, like sort of an automatic, and said that there was a quote that I saved online that I'm looking for on my phone that I can't find right now, but it's something to the extent it says, if you about being brainwashed or something, and to the extent it says, if you've been brainwashed, lied to, and deceived, and you don't realize it, it's because you've been brainwashed, lied to, and deceived. But it applies over to this, and some of that's coming because I'm watching this series called The Vow, which is this crazy thing on HBO that's actually like the weirdest is crazy. It as a psychologist guy, it just fascinates me how that happens. But I think this happens in life is you can't recognize it because you're in it. That's really the point there,
It's
right?
so true. And we're all in it and we do a lot of reps in it. It's like, oh, it's you again, my old friend. Here we are again. I thought we were done with this. Oh, I guess we're not. I remember, just to illustrate this, I remember when I was in graduate school at Yale with your mama. But I remember when I was there, I lost a really just important relationship in my life and I grieved it deeply. And it was sometime when my very best friend, she just looked at me one day, I think some time had passed. She's like, it's time to be done now. You got to get back to the land of the living. It's time to be done. And I was like thinking, the Irish in me is like, how can you say this to me? Like very dramatic, right? But she spoke truth and I knew it and she was right. And I was glad that she yanked me out of that whirlpool and I got back to, the land of the living, so to speak. And that's why I'm choosing to be vulnerable and sharing stories like that with you listening to this, because I think if we're all being honest, we have gone through these tougher moments in time and the cascading. Now, see, I've mentioned a few times that cascading is really seductive. Why it's seductive, my theory on this, and again, I'm not a scientist studying this one, but here's my hunch about it. When you are spinning, you are in a reactive place. You're emotionally charged. When you are emotionally charged, you are not thinking. And if your stress response is on, your senses are going to be heightened. So you're really kind of absorbing this experience like a sponge. And when you are in that spongy reactive space, you will be reminded of every other time in your life you have felt something similar to this. And your memory, the little people in your mind are going to go through all your file banks and your databases and they'll be like, oh yeah, remember that time back in 1984 when this happened, or back in 2002 when that happened? And because you are spongy and you are reactive, you're going to be like, yeah. And then your emotions are going to just keep ratcheting in whatever direction they're going because of whatever emotion that you're feeling. So again, you don't want to take the bait. You don't want to jump on that hook. You want to just stay with what you are experiencing now and really feel it. And this is contrary to a lot of, I think, what we see out there on social media. It's like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel uncertainty. I don't want to feel concern. I don't want to feel these things. So I'm going to numb or distract myself in a million other ways so I don't have to be with this pain or whatever I'm experiencing because it feels uncomfortable. And I don't want to feel that way. Not today. Too much is going on. But when you do acknowledge it, when you do name it and you sit with it for like 60 seconds, the pain starts to go down. people have done some remarkable studies on this. John Kabat-Zinn has done studies on this with pain. So people who have been experiencing chronic pain, the kind just doesn't want to go away. They have used some mind techniques to start to unlock that pain cycle. And so it's really remarkable what your mind can do when you start to just be aware and then you choose to go into it. Now, how does this link to self-confidence, to self-esteem, to how you see yourself? I think for me, and Brandon, tell me what you see in the communities and circles that you run in. But one of the things I've seen out here on the East Coast, and I do think it's probably very widely seen if you look, at least in the West, when you are feeling things, I think you're extremely vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, sometimes you can lose sense of who you are because of your vulnerability. You're open and you are feeling things and you feel tender and maybe a little bit raw. And not to get into a gender discussion, but I do find in my work with women, especially incredible female professionals, I mean, there's a reason why they've named something called the Imposter Syndrome. You can have a woman who has 10 out of 10 of everything that is being looked for in a new job. And she'll think, oh, I don't have those 10. I think I only have 2 of them really. And maybe I should wait another year before I apply. And you can have a man or somebody who is feeling more masculine who can just say, oh, I've got 3 of these, I'm good, And it's more complicated than that. But I think especially in female populations or people who see themselves more as female, there is this tendency to just hear what words are coming to you and to sometimes take the hook, take the bait off of this. I was listening to this recently because I was listening to the old play called Gaslight. Now that's where the term gaslighting comes from. There's a UK version of the play, but there's also a US version of the play. And essentially takes place, a woman has married a man who is in a house. He's hunting for some treasure that might be hidden up in the attic. She thinks something's going wrong. He's trying to tell her that, no, everything's fine. You're making this up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's gaslighting. And that's where the term actually comes from. The thing is, you don't want to gaslight yourself. You don't want to allow people to come to you or even in your head to start to erode who you are and what you're about. Because in an uncertain climate, you might need to really show up who you are in your fullness because of the environment. And you might find yourself at a moment of personal heroism. You didn't even know you were going to do that day. So cascading, when you see it, don't go down the rabbit holes of the emotional zones it wants to take you to a place of really self-loathing or a place of horrible self-esteem because you don't think that you are worthy of the experience you are having, or somebody is just having a bad day. Let's take this into an example. Let's say there's person A and person B. Person A is having a really crappy day, really not great. Kids are acting up at home. They are dealing with everything in the office. Nothing's out of it. And they just, in a moment of probably less than awesome professional behavior, take it out on the subordinate, really scream and yell. Now, that subordinate is person B. And person B has also had a pretty crappy day. Person B has decided in this moment that person A might be right about them. That maybe what that person said, how did you even get this job? I can't even believe they hired you. You fill in the blank with your own creative bubble making on that one of conversation. Problem is, person B in that moment is like, shoot. This reminds me of the time when I was in college and my professor yelled at me in front of everybody. Maybe I didn't know what I was talking about then. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about now. And then go down to, oh yeah, that reminds me of like this family gathering. Somebody said something to me, accused me of not really knowing my stuff. I felt really like an idiot. Who did I think I was? And so on. And so they start to just really decline and go down. And that's what I mean. Like you hear in that example, the internal gaslighting of like, oh yeah, I mean, who do you think you are? It's kind of like being a self-bully or a critic. Those are other ways that you can name it. But if you don't stop that, it can really erode your self-confidence. Now, if you're listening and you're like nodding along, and you're like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've actually done it. I've been person A. Don't want to do that again. Well, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start to rebuild yourself up out of that personal whirlpool. And that's going to be a slow moment by moment of acknowledging, yeah, I did it. Yep, that happened. That's true. That was a real thing. I experienced it. And I'm really sorry I did it to myself. Or get really curious. What was happening in this moment that I let person A just like rip me a new one? I didn't deserve that. Just because they're having a meltdown doesn't mean that needs to be my problem. Let them have their meltdown. I don't need to absorb that energy. And that's why when you go back to the cascading conversation and being that reactive sponge, it's so much easier to absorb other people's stuff if you are in that highly reactive absorption state. I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I made 2 notes, Kelly, so far we've talked about a tool to help with overwhelm, which is naming what's happening. Another one I would offer is I created this trigger. So I actually created the trigger of when I remember the past, because like you're saying, it just keeps building. I remember. It's like, so I don't know that that was the trigger, but what I do is I created a habit that when I start to go back to the past, I say, I forgive and release the past. And and every time I can tell you, like, sometimes I'm brushing my teeth and I remember the past I don't know how that happened, but it definitely happened that brushing the teeth triggered. So I reworked the whole thing, and brushing the teeth is no different than finding yourself in a situation where you say, I remember. So you're going to have to create a trigger or a habit. It's really a little habit. It's not a big habit, which is when you recognize it, you can say it, but you can also reprogram yourself. And candidly, it took a while. I mean, it takes a lot of reps, right? But I can almost do it every time. And it brings me to the moment versus, because like you're saying, it's seductive in the sense that you're like, oh, I remember this. And then what you're going to do is that's going to trigger something else that you say, oh, and I remember this. And before you know it, you're 25 years back in high school in some crap that you couldn't even control anyway, right? And you're making it the moment. So I think that if you can create just a little saying, or I got this from some work that I did, what is it saying? I forgive and release the past. You could just make it, I release the past. And just saying that, it's almost like, well, can you really just do it that quickly? Yeah, you can. You really can do it that quickly. So I would offer that as a tool to the listeners. And the other thing that I was going to say is, and maybe you might not find yourself in it as much as I may, but I've been described as a very intense person. So occasionally that intensity comes out, and maybe when I'm agitated, it comes out the wrong way occasionally. But what I found is that when you go back, you don't, if that happens, it's one thing that you're focused on yourself and getting your own crap together, right, in that moment, but you've affected other people, and you have to recognize that. And what I found is I just go, and I find this with Yvette, my wife, for those who don't know that, and I'm just like, hey, I'm really hungry. And it changes, because if you're listening and you think about doing it with your partner, how many times have you gotten in an argument that was, let's just use, because you're hungry? For me, when I get hungry, I'm pretty irritable, and most people who are close to me know that, and they feed me regularly, so it works well. But what happens is, think about what happens with your spouse. You're hungry and you snap. I'm going to use that word. You snap at someone because you haven't caught that, and you don't go back and at least within some good period of time correct that. the rest of your day, 2 days, could be total hell with that relationship with the person. And I found that even in what I would term an adversary, in the sense that maybe we work together, but we don't really, I'm not going to like eat crabs with that person. Right.
Yeah.
But we don't hate each other, but we don't like it. We're just neutral. But even when it happens there and I go back, that relationship totally changes. I'll be like, hey, I was totally hungry. Or the other day, Yvette came in, and after she rides the Peloton, she likes to like, and I know how it feels. You get back from a big ride and you're like, you just want to like decompress and talk for a minute and talk about things that happen. And I was like, hey, I can't talk right now. And then before she left the office, which isn't that big here, I caught myself because I created a trigger and I was like, hey, I want to talk to you, but I have been working 40 minutes on trying to fix this coding error. I can't find the code and I'm irritated right now. So this has nothing to do with you. And let me get this fixed and I'll come back and talk to you. And I would suggest, I think I get to say this after 23 years of marriage, that if you do not fix it at that moment, Yvette and I's relationship or experience with one another is very different the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And it also happens in the professional communities, and it happens in the entrepreneurial communities. It happens any place where you are working long hours with people, and another word you could use would be like leaky, right? Like I'll sometimes see that with people, and we hear it also in the martial arts community that I'm involved with. It's like, oh, somebody's energy is just leaking out. It's leaky and like bad verbiage. It's leaky and just like emotional ick. And you feel it too. You're like, I just feel like I got slimed by somebody. Like, ugh, this isn't my stuff. Like, and sometimes I'll even like take my hands around my body and I'll be like, take back your stuff. Like, ooh, this isn't my stuff. Like, I don't want this. You deal with this, not me. This is not mine today. I have the right to like not carry your stuff like a Sherpa today. I'm not doing that. I don't get paid to do that. And the other way you can frame it too is, what I heard in what your conversation was with Yvette in that moment is like, you were respecting her also by being transparent about where you were at. So you didn't cause unnecessary damage there, which is going to go a long way. On the other hand, it's like you can also make sure that when somebody says like, man, can I just vent? I just need to vent. And it's nice when people actually ask permission to vent. It's like, okay, you recognize you are in the whirlpool. You recognize you're in there and you've got a close buddy or a partner or a spouse and you're like, ah, and you just unleash. It's always really nice before you like just drop all your crap in somebody else's world to be like, you have like 2 minutes for me to just vent. Like there's nothing for you to say here. I just need to vent. And your friend, spouse, partner, hopefully will be like, yes, or hey, not right now because I just did 40 minutes of coding and this isn't working well. I'll come back to you for the vent sesh. But ask permission before you vent. This is like, it's a solid for you and this is solid for other people. And when you are the listener to the vent sesh, all you're supposed to do is just be a really good guest in that person's world. Because when the person is venting, remember, they're not thinking, they're emotionally reactive. They're just squeezing the sponge out. And you're just trying not to absorb it in their place.
Yeah, I think that's hard for men sometimes.
It's hard because you want to fix it.
Thing and recognizing the difference between fixing and going along, I think it can be a struggle. But I can say this, if you are going to do it, what you just said totally fixes it for me. If Yvette says, hey, or anyone, you or any friend or colleague says, hey, I'm just going to vent, well, then I'm not in fixing mode, right? Because at least my brain understands that this isn't about fixing. Maybe you can comment afterwards, but it's really about listening. And one thing before I forget on the catching and telling people why builds on another episode that you and I already did, which is storytelling, because what's going to happen is if you don't disclose, so to speak, why you did that, that person leaves with a story in their head that they're going to make up. And now
once they catch themselves, yeah.
And they're not going to, the likelihood that they're going to catch themselves is probably not as high because they're going to be emotional. And now you've turned them into a cascading event. So you got to, what would mom say? Like, understand the consequences of your actions, or whatever the what are they, rules of the house or rules of the universe are. But I think I just wanted to say that because that's why the relationships in your business, especially now with working on video and voice, right? Like, if I can't, you and I are looking at each other, people listening are only going to be listening. They can't see us. It's almost more important to start disclosing these things, because that story is that they're going to make up that you snapped. I'm using that word. Maybe I grew up with that word, but it's just, and now you find yourself in this terribly cascading world of events that doesn't just, it doesn't just happen in your world. Now you've just spread it into an entire organization.
Yeah. And look, for anybody out there who's ever worked on a team or has run a team, you know that it can just take one really toxic individual. I mean, and I'm not saying that that person is toxic, but has a toxic personality, so negative, so bullying, so cynical, you name it, it can really damage a team. I mean, I think it was Google who did a big study about like what are actually the attributes that make a really healthy, high performing, dynamic team. And it comes down to psychological safety. Is this someone I feel psychologically safe with? I can be vulnerable with, a little raw with. I mean, not to get to the point of oversharing, but can I be human around this person? And that's going to be okay. But what it's going to take for those individuals to actually build that kind of esprit de corps is going to take a lot longer. So a good way to go back to tie in what you were saying, Brandon, and what we were talking about earlier is you want to wake up in the moment. You want to name it. Oh, I'm here again. And if you find yourself in the past, here's what I do. Brandon, you have your thing that you say. What I usually say to myself when I'm like going back, I'm going back in time, not back to the future, but I'm going back in time. I'll be like, look, you have done that, you have lived that. It's not going to help you today, but it points out where maybe I still have some tender bits that need some care, but I may not have time in this moment or privacy in this moment to go back and to do that work. But I want to recognize like, oh, I know what this is really about. It's not really about this person over here being kind of a jerk. It really goes back to this core moment I had when I was younger where I got to unravel that. And often you can do that with a wonderful professional to help you get there. The other thing is another way to frame it is you are waking to take your word, Brandon, you're snapping yourself out of the trance. This is a trance. You want to wake up and like, oh, I know where this is going to take me. This takes me nowhere good. And quite frankly, I need all that energy. I need it to do these things that I want to do later in my day or the things I've got coming up in the week. I want to be mindful about that. We mentioned if you are noticing that you need to just vent a little bit, ask first, and put a time limit on it, and don't go past that time limit out of respect for yourself and other people. You don't want to drown the people who support you into your whirlpool with you. You're trying to squeeze that sponge out in a healthy way. And if you are the listener to the Sponge Fest, you want to be a great guest. This is not your time to fix it. This is not your time to just validate. Yep, I hear what you're saying. Oh my gosh, of course you feel that way. What a crappy day. Oh man, yeah, I hear what you're saying. You want to be a great, great guest because that's how you do build that psychological safety. And that's how you actually reaffirm, oh yeah, and if you're listening and you're like, oh man, this is a pattern I hear off this person, this is not the moment to try to correct it. Not right now, not when someone's reactive. This is something to just put a little pin in and come back when you can have a more constructive, rational, logic-based conversation when you are not so charged with all these emotions. And I think those small things, naming, pausing, asking for what you need, and knowing where it's going to take you, your physical sensations, that's all going to be really important, like almost a compass that you can keep in your back pocket with you. And that is enough. And you're not going to get it 100%. But every time you do get it, here's what it's going to give you. It's going to give you increased resiliency to handle really uncomfortable moments. And when we are in uncertainty, like we are these days, you are building yourself into a much more resilient person, able to handle a greater capacity to be with what's uncertain, with what you can't control. The more you try to control it, the less it seems to go sometimes in our favor. So it's just recognizing like, oh yeah, look at me. I'm trying to do that thing again. I'm trying to control this situation. I gotta stop it because it's not helping me. It's just going to make me crazy with the situation. That's hard to do. And again, the waking up in that moment is the key there.
I was reading something this weekend about leadership, which is a whole nother topic for another time, because I find this thing overused as well. I find that we're talking a lot about overused things, maybe because we're at heightened sense of awareness of everything at the moment. But there was, I forget what it was, but the saying was, if you want to lead, you got to lead yourself first. And,
right.
and I think that's, because I was thinking I was going to say, Kelly, one of the other things that helps me when I'm on the receiving end of some of this stuff, I always remind myself everybody's struggling with a story. And it helps me not be as emotionally charged at that moment. It doesn't mean, I think there's a balance you have to keep, because you could overuse that and be dismissive of someone's feelings. And that's a high risk. But I think when you receive that, you're like, okay, man, everybody's got a story. I acknowledge that. If there's something here I did wrong, I'm going to take responsibility for it, but maybe it's not this extreme thing. So I would offer that as, in my head, I've got these 3 tools that we're leaving behind, which is recognizing some sort of triggered self-affirmation, for lack of a better, or affirmation, for lack of a better way to put it. And then just recognizing when you're on the receiving end that somebody has a story, and that it might, humans are very focused. We have this like, don't be selfish thing, but humans really are focused on themselves, right? It's like the gym. Somebody says, Brandon, I can't go to the gym because everybody's watching me. No, actually, likely that they're watching themselves in the mirror. That's why there's mirrors. Everybody in the gym is looking at themselves. They're not staring at you. So there's this idea that humans always want to talk about me and self-centered, but I'm offering that third idea just because it will get you from reacting as quickly. I'm not saying that that's easy, right? Because it can be hard to not have that, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a nice little micro practice here. The way I like to do it is, okay, I've caught myself, I'm in the whirlpool, I'm spinning, I'm cascading, name whatever you want there. So I'm naming it, I'm pausing. I pause before I do anything else because I don't want to react necessarily. I want to get a good handle on what's going on for me in my internal space so that I know how I want to behave in my external space. So I want to be a good person to myself. I want to acknowledge what's true. And then I want to breathe and I want to ask myself, okay, knowing all of this, what's important right now? And it might be right now, Kelly, the most important thing is you're going to go into that meeting and you are going to be the most relaxed person. And that's the thing. In another situation, it might be what's important right now is I just don't lose my cool. If it's another thing, it might be that, you know what, I don't even know what to do right now. So I'm just going to say, hey, I need some time. I'm going to come back to you because I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer yet. Let me get back to you and have a think about it. That's going to be incredibly important. Because remember, when you pause, and I think this is sometimes neglected when we talk about just so much in just consultancy or leadership or mindfulness, wherever you want to go with it, pausing is where you feel the most. That's where you're going to get the most intelligence because you are not rushing into your next thing. You are not reacting. You are going to move from a place that's from your core. You're going to move. I remember, I may have shared this story, Brandon, so I forgive me if I have in the past, but for those who might be listening to it for the first time, I'm a longtime martial artist. I've been practicing martial arts since I was 19 years old. So that's more than 20 years. I won't get into how much past 20 that is, but it's more than 20. And I've had just great fortune to study with some terrific teachers. And I remember when I was getting into Ki Aikido. Ki Aikido is the study of the energy, the Ki, right? The Chi, the life force, the prana, whatever. And I remember this very short Vietnamese master, my sensei, he was like, all right, guys, push me over. And you're like, he asked this guy who was like 6'6" to push him over, and he's like 5'1". So you're like, oh yeah, Bill's going to take him down. Like, let's see how this happens. No, Sensei pushed Bill down and pushed pretty much all of us down. And he's like, how do you think I did that? And we're like, well, because you're Sensei. And he's like, no. Like, come on, guys. How do you think I did that? Correct answer is because he used his chi, right? He used his ki energy. He decided that he was full of himself and he wasn't going to let something bigger and taller and wider than him push him around. He was going to be in control of himself. And that's the same thing. I'll never forget that, because I remember when I had to experience it myself. One of the things you do when you are an early white belt in the system is you just have people pushing against you all the time. And the whole point is they're trying to get at you mentally and physically so that you actually get pushed over. When you get up in your head and you start spinning, you get pushed over a lot faster than when you go down into your core and you believe in you. It's not as effective. And I remember them saying, like, this is going to take a while for you to get. It took about 3 months. When I finally could stand there and have all of these senseis, not just one, but like the people who were studying under him, and they all lined up and were trying to push me over, I could feel like, no, it was almost like Neo in the Matrix, like, no, I'm not going to allow this energy to come and rock me over. And I felt like a freaking badass when it was all over. But the way you take it out of the dojo and you take it into real life is people's energies can be like that 6'6" person. They can just be in a foul mood. They can be a bully. They can be just crabby. They can be having a lot that they're dealing with that is struggling. It's hard for them, but you don't have to let it knock you around, and you don't have to let the wave of that get into you and degrade your self-esteem and your own self-confidence. So I rambled there for a little bit, but
I think that's
I
a
wanted
cool
to share the story.
And it's probably a good place to end. Let's go over the 3 HPTs that we dropped throughout here.
So what we spent some time, I'll just set it up. What we spent today's session talking on was about cascading. How do you deal with being overwhelmed? How do you notice when you are in overwhelm? And then what do you do after it? So our high value points were, first, you want to name it. The moment you name it, oh, I'm in the whirlpool. Oh, I'm getting seduced by the stories I'm making up in my head. Oh, I am, in danger of like spinning for hours. Oh, I'm whatever. Name it. Remember the old fairy tales. Name it, and you're in control of it. You now know what you're dealing with. The second one after naming is you're going to pause before you do anything. This pause is brilliant. You could use it to just take a couple of deep breaths and keep your prefrontal cortex online, keep your ability to language online. You're not going to let the stress response hijack you there. You want to feel what's going on with you. You want your own intelligence before you proceed to the next thing. And the third thing is you want to ask yourself before you do anything past pausing, what's important right now? And then you do whatever you say that is. And you might have to do that 10 times a day, and that's all good.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Take those tips, put them into action. Send Kelly and I a note. We'll do another episode maybe in a few weeks. Gosh, it's already October. So maybe we'll do one in November.
Yeah. And for anyone listening out there, remember, being human isn't easy, but you don't have to make it as hard for you by making it harder on yourself.
There you have it. Kelly, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. It's always fun. We will have the full series, 9 Days Turn Yourself into a Powerhouse, out soon. And we'll let everybody know when that happens.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Listen, be kind to you, hang in there. Uh, yeah, just be kind to you.
We'll see you later.
Okay, bye.